Maybe you just discovered human design and you discovered that you are a generator or a manifesting generator and that you're designed to wait to respond. Or maybe you've known human design for quite a while and you're a generator or a manifesting generator and you're still like, what does that mean to wait to respond? If this is you, then I can tell you there are a lot of people out there that are like you. Very many people who come to me for readings and to work with me as a mentoring client still are in a questioning phase, sometimes with a lot of frustration as a good generator, around what does it mean to respond. So I decided to create a video for you, which is about responding. And I am actually responding to some comments that I had on one or two of my videos, and also to what I hear from people when I'm doing readings. So this is an example of how you can respond. And I'm excited to share with you what it is that I have learned over the last few years as I've been really practicing this a lot. When you get this piece, your life will change dramatically for the better. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Waiting to respond. There's definitely confusion about what this means, and I hope to shed some light on this today. And I want to share with you what's in the way of getting to this, because I think this is a big part of it, is that we have some really big things in our way. And then I want to share with you keys to wrapping your mind around this first, because I think there's a big mindset shift that we need to have. And then there's a skill that we need to learn how to develop, because it's probably not something that you were taught as a kid or you saw other people in your life doing. And then I want to share with you some places to look for things to respond and how you can set up your life so that you constantly have things to respond to, and how to practice responding. Okay, how to practice, and also your number one ally in response. My very first exposure to human design was when I plugged in my birth information into a piece of software, and it spit out, I think I paid $15 or something for this report, and it spit out this report. And the big thing it said is, you're a generator, you're designed to wait to respond. And I was like, what? Like, there was no explanation about what that meant. There was no coaching or anything to help you do that. It just said, you're designed to wait to respond. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm an Aries sun. I've been initiating my entire life. So I actually dismissed it and walked away from human design for some period of time, few years. And my life would have been very different if I had paid attention then, but I didn't have the information or the support that I needed to be able to kind of take that in and make sense of it. So if you've had that similar situation like that, it's really common. There's nothing wrong with you. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't fail the generator intelligence test. You just didn't have the support and the information that you needed. So fast forward a few years until I had actually burned out again. And I thought, well, maybe I'll take another look at this human design thing. And I got a reading, actually got a relationship reading with the man I was in relationship with at the time. And the first mistake that we made is that I didn't have my own reading first. He'd had a reading a few years ago. He didn't remember it very well. I'd never had a reading. And I spent most of that relationship reading trying to figure out what it meant to respond and didn't really take in that. So just saying, I don't ever do relationship readings unless everybody's had their own individual reading first. So that's why I do it that way. But then what I did is I asked the reader if he would do an individual reading with me. And we spent most of that time talking about what does it mean to wait to respond. Well, he had some guidance to give about that, but not a lot. He didn't have a lot of texture to it. And I thought, you know what? If this is really the way 70% of the population are designed to operate, there must be something to this. And so I decided to do an experiment for myself, and I just stopped initiating. I said, I'm not going to start anything for the next couple of months and see what happens. I had never done that in the past because I was afraid that nothing would happen. Based on my mindset, based on the way that I had been programmed and the way I had been living my life and how I thought my life had worked, I thought, well, nothing's going to happen if I don't initiate it, if I don't make it happen, right? Well, what I discovered is that in a relatively short period of time, I actually had a lot of things to respond to. But it took some time for me to learn what was genuinely something to respond to, and then also how to respond, because that involves my authority as well as my strategy, which is to wait to respond. So I want to go into some detail with you today about all those different pieces, because they all work synergistically together. And if you are missing any of those parts, then it can be very hard to access the true magic of what's available to you when you start to live your human design as a generator or a manifesting generator. I want to note here that on many printouts for manifesting generators, it says that you're designed to respond and then initiate. The way that I was trained and what I have seen is that it's really better for manifesting generators as well as generators to learn to respond, because your response will protect you really from getting an idea and just running with it, which is what can happen with manifesting generators. It can really happen to any of us because it's how we've been conditioned to act. But it can really happen with manifesting generators because they do have this manifesting energy, which comes from having a motor going to the throat. Okay, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that. I do have a bunch of different videos about manifesting generators and how that all works, so you can go check that out if you want to. But I just want to say that there is this manifesting energy, but the response will protect you from running down a path too quickly without checking out to make sure that it is, number one, the right thing for you, and number two, it's the right time. So if you're a manifesting generator, I really want you to pay attention to what I'm going to share today. And everything is for all generators, okay? Pure generators like myself and manifesting generators. I also want to say, even if you're emotionally defined, which means your emotional solar plexus is colored in, everything I'm going to talk about today applies to you as well. Okay, and when we get to this point where we're talking about authority, I'll say a little bit more about that. But for right now, just know whatever your authority is and whatever your type of generator you are, this video is for you. So wait to respond. Respond to what? And why? And what's that all about? The only way that I know how to make sense of this is to have a spiritual orientation to life, really. And this is the idea that we are in a dynamic relationship with the creative intelligence of the universe. I like to call this the flow of life. Some people call it spirit. Some people call it the universe. Some people call it God or goddess or the all that is. Any and all of these terms for the divine, for this sense that there is a creative intelligence that has been creating our universe for however many billions or trillions of years that's been going on, right? That we are actually in dynamic relationship with it. And in fact, we are an expression of it. So we're not separate from it. We're actually a part of it. And I think in modern spirituality, we've kind of picked up what a lot of the ancient spiritual traditions knew, which is that we are in fact part of it all. I am a Kundalini yoga teacher, and the more that I have learned the yoga traditions, the more I can see this is throughout all of the early writings and the teachings of yoga as well, which are thousands and thousands of years old, far predate Western civilization, okay? But they understood that we are part of this greater web of life, if you will. Web of life is a term that comes from, I think of it as coming from indigenous people who are indigenous to the Americas. It might be the case with indigenous people in different parts of the world. But it's this idea that there is a web or a grid that connects everything, right? And that we are an expression of that and everything else is. And that there are impulses that are moving along this web of life, right? That the flow of life or the creative intelligence is sending messages along this web of life. The thing is that most of us don't know how to pay attention to that. We don't necessarily believe it when we do get one of those messages. We tend to get really kind of myopic in our gaze, right? We look at the computer screen. We might look at a book, or a tablet or a phone. We get very kind of closed in terms of our point of view, and we aren't able to really feel our connection to this larger flow of life. So that's one piece, is just our lifestyle, right? And our technology is fostering that. But something else that's really in our way is this idea of individualism, which really came in like the 18th century, and it's a big part of sort of American culture, U.S. culture. The American dream is based in this idea of individualism, that anyone can excel based on their own talents and their own drive. Right? This was the myth that got sent out largely to Europeans, right? To say, come here and you have the land of opportunity. Now, people have been coming to the United States from all over the world for a long time, but initially in the 19th century, this was really geared towards Europeans, because the people who were in power in the U.S. at that time wanted white people to come so that we could populate the United States with white people, not with Africans and African Americans, and certainly not with indigenous people, right? So we have to understand that this idea of the American dream is also embedded in a pretty racist and misogynistic, because women weren't really included in that, and xenophobic. So depending on where you are from, if you were coming from Asia, for example, as opposed to coming from Europe, that wasn't really well looked upon. So this idea that anybody can come to the land of opportunity and can excel is really mitigated by a lot of other factors, right? And so it's not an equal playing field, if you will, for all people of all genders, all races, all religions, all national oranges, all sexualities, and all of that, right? It's not, and it never has been. And yet this story, if you will, this myth of the American dream has captured the imagination of people all over the world for a long time. And a key piece of this is that you can come from any background and you can come here. And if you have the intelligence and the drive and the savvy, you can start your own business. You can create a new life for yourself, and you can create a very different experience for yourself and your family. Now, that has been true for a certain number of people, okay? But what I want to say is embedded in that is this idea that we are somehow separate, we are individual, we are autonomous, we are independent, right? And in that, we are kind of cut off from each other. We're competing with each other, and we are not really connected to the flow of life. We're not connected to that web of life, right? It's kind of this, if it's to be, it's up to me, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, go out there and make something happen, get attention for yourself and all of that. And I certainly grew up with that. The idea that if I was going to exceed in my life, it was up to me. Yes, I had the family that I came from. Yes, they provided me with an education. But even so, it was going to be up to me to make things happen in my life. And I lived that way for a really long time. And I'll tell you, that attitude can be really good for achievement. It certainly supported me in achievement for a long time, but it's also exhausting. And it led to a lot of burnout for me. I've seen a lot of people for whom it's led to burnout. But this programming goes really, really deep to believe that, I have to do it on my own. And I think those of us who have a lot of individual circuitry, as I do, also do have a lot of individual impulses, if you will, right? We kind of like to do things our own way. And that's cool, right? It's not like you necessarily have to give that up. But the bigger picture, if we're just to really step back and really look at the big picture, if we can understand that we are a part of a very dynamic universe, in which energy is flowing all the time, in which things are birthing and growing and expanding and then contracting and falling apart and dying and composting and then being remade. And it's happening all over the place all the time. And it's very, very dynamic. And it's happening according to a kind of intelligence that honestly, we as human beings don't really understand all that much. Like we've been kind of tapping in a little bit and understanding a little bit more, but especially those of us who are brought up in Western cultures, we tend to see things in a much more kind of linear, logical, analytical, scientific, and I say Western scientific point of view, which is material based and is not honoring of all that is unseen and unknown, and certainly of this greater flow of life. I mean, in fact, a lot of that mindset about rationality and scientific knowledge and being able to, map out the natural world and to quantify it and manipulate it and so on was specifically set against religion and against so-called superstition, which were kind of earth-based spirituality, right? Or against anything known as like intuition and things like that. We're becoming aware of the limitations of that way of thinking about things. And I think this is why over the last 50 years, we've had this big blossoming, certainly in the West, of many, many people like myself have been very interested in philosophies that come out of Asia that are much more holistic and much more energetically focused. And human design is based in many of those as well, even though the system was given to a Western man. They're based in systems that largely come out of Asia. I think one of the biggest downsides of this whole idea of the American dream and individualism and everything is that if you don't succeed in certain ways, you might think something's wrong with you. Right? Or you might feel like you're at the mercy of a world that is much bigger than you are, and you kind of have to be working against this huge world that is out to get you, basically, right? And it's just not true. It's just that fosters victim consciousness, makes us feel like we are separate and alone, and that we have to have our defenses up and we have to be fighting, right? Really not good for your nervous system, for one thing. Plus, it's not accurate. So I want to tell you about some research, which I have found absolutely fascinating, which helps us to understand from a whole different realm what this is about. So there's a woman called Susan Simard. I think that's how you say her name, or Simard. And she's done all this research on trees. And I want to read you a little bit from what she says. So according to Simard, she says, trees are linked to neighboring trees by an underground network or fungi that resembles the neural networks in the brain. In one study, she watched as a Douglas fir that had been injured by insects appeared to send chemical warning signals to a ponderosa pine growing nearby. The pine tree then produced defense enzymes to protect against the insect. Now, I don't know about you, but I wasn't brought up to know that trees were actually communicating with each other under the ground. This is one of those things where, the unseen for us largely has been unknown. We had no idea that this was happening underneath, again, from this kind of Western point of view. But not only caution, she goes on to say, so this was a breakthrough, Simard says. The trees were sharing information that actually is important to the health of the whole forest. And one of the things this really awakens in me is understanding that a forest is not just individual trees, right? It's an entire ecosystem that is continually communicating with itself. So she says, in addition to warning each other of danger, the trees have been known to share nutrients at critical times to help keep each other healthy. She says the trees in a forest are often linked to each other via an older tree she calls a mother or hub tree. Quote, in connecting all the trees of different ages, the mother trees can actually facilitate the growth of these understory seedlings. The seedlings will link to the network of the old trees and benefit from that huge uptake in resource capacity. And the old trees would also pass a little bit of carbon and nutrients and water to the little seedlings at crucial times in their lives that actually help them survive. Fascinating, right? Who knew? I think that is so cool. And it's a great example of how we're actually all really connected to each other. I think a lot of times we see trees and we know they're alive, right? We know that they're alive, but we don't think of them as sentient necessarily in that same way. Or even if we do think of them as sentient, we don't know how to understand their sentience, right? We don't understand their communication and everything like this. And I think this research is really, really helpful for us to start to understand that we are part of this greater web of life, and that these impulses are constantly going along that web. If you're willing to take this in, the implication is that everything is responding to everything else all the time. Wow, what a big idea that is, right? I think I've had it intellectually, but learning my human design and learning how to respond and learning how to use my authority has taught me how it actually works. This is incredibly liberating when you get it, and you will really understand, not just intellectually, but in your bones, that you're not alone and you're not on your own. So the keys to wrapping your mind around this, because I think this is the first step we need to do, is to wrap our mind around it. Right? Is to get that we're not alone, we're not on our own, that we are in a dynamic relationship with spirit, whatever you want to call that, the universe. And this requires us to step outside of our logical mind and to stop trying to figure things out all the time. Now, I know that that was the way I was taught, and I would imagine that this is the way that you've been taught. I can tell you the vast majority of people who come to me for readings or for mentoring are really working with this piece of being able to step outside of this impulse to always try to figure things out with their logical mind. Now, we want our logical mind, we want our left brain. It's helpful, but in the human design system, it's only one of three ways of knowing, because there's also our right brain energy and there's also the knowing circuit. And so it's important for us to get that there are multiple ways for us to understand things. We've all been taught that we should be using our logic and our reason, right? But then we've got this part of us that actually isn't our inner being. It's not our inner wisdom. That is often skeptical, doubting, undermining things, right? Getting us to kind of be defensive and so on. And so we want to be able to get a handle on that part and not allow it to be running us. So the key to this is to be able to start slowing down and paying more attention to your thoughts and to be more mindful of this, to be more aware, which is the basis of meditation, right? This is the purpose of meditation, is to be able to start being able to get a handle on what's actually running through our minds and what emotional energy is running us, okay? So we want to be able to get some perspective on that so that we're not just unconsciously playing out these programs that were installed in us when usually much younger, and that we're running out of them. So we want to be able to get a handle on our thoughts and our emotions, and we want to focus our attention on what we want rather than on what we don't want. We want to give that juice. We want to give it fuel. We want to send energy in that direction by focusing our attention on it. When we do that, we then signal to this creative intelligence of the universe that this is what we want more of in our life. We know what you've probably heard this phrase, where attention goes, energy flows. So you want to be paying attention to that rather than the things that you're afraid of or the things that you're doubting about or you're skeptical about. You want to be focusing your attention more on what you want, and then you want to be receptive and foster your faith that that creative intelligence is going to bring things to you that you say that you want. Okay, so law of attraction is definitely related to this, and we have our own version of law of attraction in human design. I'm not going to go into that in detail today, but I do have other videos on that I'll put down in the description. But my point simply is that you have a role to play in terms of what the creative intelligence brings to you that you get to respond to by focusing on what you want instead of on focusing on what you don't want. And so you need to be receptive at that point. You have to foster your faith so that you can actually be going, I really want this new relationship, for example. ooh, this is what it would feel like to have that new relationship. And this is how I'm getting myself ready for that. And this is what excites me about having this new relationship. And you get yourself into that state of positive anticipation, right? And then you start looking around in your current reality to say, hey, what is it that I have to respond to? And it's at that point that the flow of life will start to bring things to you that you get to act on. Okay. And you can think of this as a form of intuition, if you will, because what is intuition but our interface with the divine, our interface with that creative intelligence of the universe or of our own inner being. And so it's a great way to be practicing that. Okay, let's get really practical here. So what do you have to respond to? I mean, I have talked to people who literally told me they were sitting around for years waiting for things to respond to. I was like, wow, ouch. What happened for me was I realized pretty quickly that I had many, many things to respond to. And that without even understanding human design, I had filled my life with things that I got to respond to. So let me just give you a list, okay? So for example, movies and television. Okay, there's all kinds of things you get to respond to there. Books, videos, blogs, social media, the news. Okay, all of those can provide you with things to respond to. Programs that you're involved in, anything educational that you're involved in. But in addition to that, other people, conversations that you have with people, even watching the way other people behave or things that they do or that they don't do. Noticing what's happening in the world around you that you're like, wow, I could see how that could operate differently. So the world is full of things for you to get to respond to. But then what? How do you know what's really there for you to respond to? And what is your response? So this is, as a generator, where your sacral authority comes in. So I just want you to know, even if you're emotionally defined, you still have sacral authority. All generators have sacral authority. It's that red square. It's the most powerful engine in the chart, and it's what makes us a generator. And your sacral is a highly sensitive inner guidance system, if you will, right? It's your inner GPS, and it's the way that your inner wisdom talks to you. So when you get something to respond to, let's just go back to that example I was mentioning a little bit before. Let's say you're really interested in, having a new relationship. You're starting to get emotionally involved in it. You're getting excited about it. You're thinking about it. And then the next thing you know, you have a friend who, sends you a text and says, hey, do you want to go, to this dance on Friday night? And you're like, I guess that's maybe something for me to respond to. And you get to ask your sacral, should I go to this dance? Okay, so then you may or may not know that you're going to meet somebody at this dance, but you do know that, okay, I've been putting out there something about what I want, and something came to me, somebody invited me to something, and I got and so you go, right? This is not a linear process. It's not going to go, like step by step. It's not logical. It's not going to go that way. It could be very, very circuitous, and who knows? You may go to that dance and meet somebody. And you may not. You may just go to that dance and get yourself into a positive state of mind, become more and more radiant. And as you do that, you become more and more magnetic to what it is that you want. So you need to get in touch with that sacral authority. And I have a bunch of videos about sacral authority that you can go and check out. And so that you can know how you're going to respond to something, because you may have this invitation that comes in and your sacral might go, You're like, oh, don't go to the dance? You don't necessarily know why, but you want to follow that sacral authority, because the more that you do, the more that the flow of life is going to give you things to respond to when you honor that inner guidance. So if you have your own business, because this comes up for me a lot, is if you have your own business, people are like, how am I supposed to put myself out there into the world? And how am I supposed to market myself if I'm designed to respond? Well, it's actually easy. The thing is you're not initiating the same way, but you're responding. So like, for example, I'm shooting this video because some people said they wanted it. Okay. And if you're a business owner, you ask your people or you ask your prospective people what's going on for them. You want to get interested in them. You ask them questions about what the challenges are in their life that match the thing that you want to offer them. The place where I think business owners get into trouble a lot, and this is true regardless of your type, is that they just get an idea about something they want to create and they just want to put it out there. And they're not paying attention as to, does anybody want it? Does anybody want it right now? Is now the right time? Which is one of the things that your sacral can tell you. I know I received an intuition through my knowing circuit about a conference that I wanted to do. It was 18 months until it was the right time from when I got the first idea. And I didn't know that until I started really asking my sacral. My sacral was like, not the right time, not the right time, not the right time. And I was like, oh. And then when it was the right time, boom, I had all the energy for it. Things that COVID had come. And so sort of my formulation about what it was going to be had changed. I was responding to what was going on in the outer world. And I just got the yes on the inside, that And so then I went for it. And so you're going to be able to, over time, develop your sensitivity to your sacral going, or and also to know, is it the right time for something? Is it not? What other things do I need to have in alignment? And once you get the go-ahead at the beginning of something, you don't have to constantly have to respond to everything all the time. You don't have to do that. Like for me, like starting my YouTube channel, like I knew that this was something that I would be good at. I know it was something people asked me for, and I went ahead and got started. And I didn't ask every step along the way, should I be doing this video or that video or whatever. I do that more when I don't have clarity about what I think the next thing might be. And then I'm like, okay, I need something to respond to. What would that be? And again, I'm always paying attention to what's going on around me, what people are saying they want and they need, what I see is going on, in the news or on social media. There's so much going on in our world today. There's no shortage of things to respond to. So I want to just kind of pull this together by saying that you have an inner guidance system that will be directing you in the correct way if you're paying attention to it. And if you're getting really clear in your own heart of hearts and in your belly and your sacral about what it is that you want, and you get emotionally involved with that, the flow of life will bring you things to respond to. It absolutely will. But you have to have some faith and some trust that that's going to happen. Because if you're sitting there being doubtful and skeptical that whole time, you're not going to actually, something's going to come along your way and you're going to be like, that's not it. Yeah, that's not it. Right? When it totally could be it. I had a situation with that recently where I dismissed something or I just didn't act on something fast enough and I lost the opportunity because I didn't follow my sacral fast enough. And I should know better. Fortunately, it wasn't a really big thing. And it's best to start with kind of small things initially, like, would it be good to go to this place for dinner? Or would it be go to this place when I want to go away for the weekend? Or would it be good for me to read this book versus that book? Or would it be good for me to enroll in this program versus this program? And that sort of thing. And just see what happens. The world is full of things for you to respond to. I think in the end, the most important part of this for you is to get in touch with that sacral authority because it won't steer you wrong. Okay. Many blessings. Much love.